guys, welcome back to another video. So today I've got a special video. I'm going to be doing Tears of the Kingdom versus Breath of the Wild. So I'm going to be comparing the games on different aspects and seeing who wins different bits of the game, which bit's better, what game does this bit better and stuff, and come up with an overall winner at the end of the video. So stay tuned for that. But without further ado, let's just go straight into the video. Okay, first let's talk about Breath of the Wild's introduction. You start off in this place, you have no idea where you are, you just see Link in a bath and you hear a mysterious voice, but you have no idea what the hell's going on. Until you run out into the world and see a giant land ahead of you with plenty of things to explore. You're still as confused as ever and you have no idea what's going to come. You just get a view of everything. The player is then told to go to this mysterious looking thing that ends up being a massive tower, which leads you to activating all the other towers in the world as well, and you are still as confused as ever. You were told that you have to go to 4 different shrines located upon this island where you're at, and if you try to escape and jump off, you will die. So you travel around the island unlocking new abilities, beating shrines, meeting new enemies, and exploring and getting a feel of what this game's like, which in my opinion is an absolute brilliant idea for a tutorial. Once the player has done this, they receive the paraglider as they were told to, and they are free to roam the land of Hyrule by themselves without having to be isolated on the plateau, which overall is a brilliant tutorial, and I think a lot of people can agree with me on that. Now let's talk about Tears of the Kingdom's introduction. Now the very beginning is a bit different to Breath of the Wild, as you're in this underground cave with Zelda. Now you do know a bit more about Link and Zelda because of the events of Breath of the Wild, so you're not as clueless as in Breath of the Wild, but you still don't understand everything that's going on just yet. It's sort of like an interactive cutscene that you're playing at the very beginning of the game, where you know a bit, but you know literally near nothing, but you do know a little bit. Then the pair find a body, like a mummy, underground where they are, and it goes a bit downhill for the pair as is very climactic what happens. Link's struggling to fight, Zelda is scared for her life, and really bad things are happening, and Zelda gets teleported away and Link is teleported away by this mysterious arm. We find out that this has caused meteors to fall from the sky all around the land, endangering the people. The castle was risen up with malice. Hyrule is now in its chaos again. However, with Link, he wakes up in this place. We don't know where he is. He's lying down again. It's kind of similar to the beginning of the Great Plateau, but it's kind of the same, but it's a bit different. A mysterious voice talks to Link like in the beginning of Breath of the Wild. We don't know who it is. We don't know where we are. We just know what happened through the beginning. We find the Master Sword destroyed and weak, feeling as useless as we are at the beginning of Breath of the Wild, which is a really nice touch. We run out the building to find that we are miles up in the sky, and we dive down and see loads and loads of sky islands beneath us. We see clouds everywhere. We are above Hyrule and we are in the skies and we are hidden. We know where we are. We don't know what we have to do, but we'll find out. The player arrives at a weird looking temple, but we are not strong enough to seal the lock, to unlock the door, We are told by the ghost of the mysterious man who has been talking to us, which ends up being Rauru, the old king of Hyrule from years and millennia back. He tells us that to strengthen our arm to open that door, we need to go into the shrines of light around the land. So like Breath of the Wild, our main mission is to complete shrines and unlock abilities. So similar to Breath of the Wild, we go around beating puzzles, finding out new things to do with our abilities, getting a feel what the game's like. Another perfect introduction by Nintendo. Once we become strong enough to open the door, we find Zelda, but we don't know where she is. It's in this weird realm that we're not sure about yet, but she ends up giving us a power. It's really cool, the ability to rewind time. We pass our Master Sword back in time that ends up reaching the hands of Zelda, which none of us really expected to. We are then free to jump off the Sky Islands. We are safe and we can now go back down to the surface land. Overall, there are two absolutely amazing introductions and tutorials, but I think I might have to give it the point to Tears of the Kingdom, just for that interactive cutscene at the beginning and the sheer mass and fun-filled things there are to do in the Grey Sky Island. Okay guys, now we're talking about the map and the world that the games are set in. They're both kind of set in the same world, but they are a lot different in the different ways the map is. So Breath of the Wild is a massive continent that is essentially a ruin from a catastrophic event that happened a century earlier. Even though it's kind of a massive ruin of a catastrophic event, there are so many awesome places to explore around this map, and there are things that catch your eye every second, missions and everything in this map. Nature, there are towns, settlements, people. It's just so awesome, and there's no other feeling like exploring the Hyrule for the first time in Breath of the Wild. It's just amazing, and the Breath of the Wild map is one of the best maps in any video game. In Tears of the Kingdom, the mainland of Hyrule is mostly the same, but a lot has changed, especially with the new caves that added to the game, that add a lot more variety and a lot more places to explore, which I love. But the main differences are the two new maps sort of with it, and one of them is the Depths, which is like a mirror to Hyrule with lots of places to explore, so many things to do under there, loads of new enemies to fight, loads of new places, and I love the Depths so much. It's my favourite new thing added, and I think a lot of people love the Depths as well, and I don't blame them. The Depths isn't the only new place. There's also the Sky, with loads and loads and loads of Sky Islands, with so many things to do on them, loads of puzzles, loads of things you have to build to get up. The puzzles of traversing the islands, I think, are really good, and this was like the main marketing of the game. They were hiding the Depths from us, but a lot of people were excited to see what the Sky Islands had to offer, and they did not disappoint. A lot of Sky Islands had things to do on them. Basically, all of them had something to do on them, and every time you could just be wandering around the surface and look up and see an island and think, how am I going to get there? And then you just see a meteor fall down, and you have to rewind time. It's just really, really fun, and the Sky Islands did not disappoint. Both overworlds and maps are both absolutely amazing, but Tears of the Kingdom has so much more to it than Breath of the Wild did, and the Breath of the Wild map is still there and changed so much, and there's the Sky and the Depths. There's just so much more to do in Tears of the Kingdom, so I have to give another point to Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild has many abilities in the game, starting with Magnesis, which is like this massive iron magnet that you can just use to move metal objects out the way. It helps with a lot of puzzles, like the one in the shrine, and it can be used to kill enemies, to knock away enemies, and to figure out a lot of puzzles in the game. There's also remote bombs where Link can pull out bombs from his pockets. There's either circular or square bombs, and it can be used to blow up bombable walls, to obviously damage enemies, and a lot of puzzles would need this, and it does come in handy. There's Cryonis, which you can create massive ice blocks to help get through water, and it can freeze water. You can block yourself and figure out puzzles. It's alright. There's also Stasis, where you can freeze objects in time, and it helps obviously for a lot of puzzles, and you can upgrade this so it can freeze enemies as well. You can also whack the frozen object loads of times to launch it to places, which is really fun. And you also get a camera, which is really useful for taking pictures and getting the memories in Breath of the Wild. I mean, I don't use the camera too much, but it is cool to take photos. We also can't forget the Champion's abilities that you get for doing the Divine Beasts. You have Rivali's Gale that can power wind-ups and launch you in the air, which is literally the best ability ever. You have Mipha's Grace, which heals you when you die. You have Daruk's Protection, which is like a massive shield that protects you from anything. And you have Urbosa's Fury, where you can charge attack your weapon and lightning will just come out and explode everywhere, which is awesome. Amazing abilities overall. Tears of the Kingdom also has amazing abilities, starting off with Ultra Hand, which is like a sort of Magnesis but better. It can grab anything, not just metal, and you can craft stuff by attaching different parts together to make different vehicles and stuff, which is so cool. There's fuse where you can fuse and attach different items to your weapons, and it helps for a lot of puzzles in the game, and you can upgrade damage in your weapons. It also works with bows and arrows. There's Ascend where you can just teleport like straight through objects and get to the top of them. Now this is a really useful ability that I love using, and it is very satisfying using. You just go straight up stuff. It is really fun. There's Recall where you can rewind time on an object and it goes back in time for what it did, and it's really useful because let's say you make a mistake or you drop something, you can just rewind time and it can go straight back up to you. Like Breath of the Wild, you also get a camera. Similar but different to the champion's abilities, we have the sage abilities that you get for doing the dungeons in the game. Then we have the Vow of Yunobo, which is like you can just shoot Yunobo anywhere like a cannon. It's really fun. You have the Vow of Riju that starts a bubble of lightning and you can shoot your arrows and it's like lightning strikes where your arrow hits. It's really cool. You also have the Vow of Tulin that can create a wind gust in the air to push you forward while you're gliding, which is really useful like Rivali's Gale. And you also have the Vow of Sidon, which is like a water bubble that can protect you, like Doric's protection, and also shoots a water beam when you hit your weapon. And finally, we have the Vow of Minoru, which is like this massive mechanical robot that we can control. Both games have some really fun and useful abilities, but overall, I think I have to give another point to Tears of the Kingdom, just for how many amazing abilities it has. It has more abilities, and I think the Sage abilities are more fun to use than the Champion's abilities, and plus Ultra Hand and Recall and Ascend, Fuse, they're just way too fun. Definitely Tears of the Kingdom's point. Now talking about story, I'm only going to be talking about the story we as a player play, so I'm not going to be talking about the whole Great Calamity or the Imprisoning War. If you want to hear the full stories to them, then I suggest you should go and watch Zeltic. But without further ado, I'll just start talking about the Breath of the Wild story. Now, we all know this bit. He wakes up in this mysterious bath place. I already spoke about this bit earlier, so I'll just fast forward a bit. Link meets this old man who ends up being the old king of Hyrule and tells him that in the past a massive catastrophic event happened, causing Link to be taken to the Shrine of Resurrection to heal and the princess having to fight Ganon alone. Well, 4 champions that piloted these massive mechanical beings died in them while the beings called the Divine Beasts were corrupted. It becomes Link's main mission to travel around the world and free up the Divine Beasts and free the Divine Beasts from Ganon's corruption, and also free the champion spirits that are trapped inside the Divine Beasts. Once we've accomplished this, we can go to Hyrule Castle and go to Ganon, and the Divine Beasts will help attack Ganon, and we can finally defeat him, freeing the princess and freeing Hyrule from Ganon's curse once and for all. Now, as we know, Link and Zelda start off underground, but I've already talked about this in the Great Sky Islands, so I'll skip ahead until after we jump off the Great Sky Islands. After we jump off the Great Sky Island, we go to the settlement outside of Hyrule Castle called Lookout Landing, where we see a familiar but not so familiar face, Pyrrha, who looks a lot different than she did in Breath of the Wild, and she tells us that it's not only Hyrule Castle, it's everywhere that's being affected by the upheaval. So we go to a captain at Hyrule Castle that's looking for Zelda, and we find Zelda, and she just teleports in the air, and it makes no sense. So we tell Pyrrha, but she tells us to go to the different places in Hyrule that are struggling and we have to help them, and there are these champion descendants from every settlement that we have to help. They help us go to the temples and and destroy the monsters that are doing the regional phenomena, and they become sages. And once we've got all the sages and saved the different towns from the upheaval, we go back to Lookout Landing in Pura, where we find Zelda at Hyrule Castle. So we have to go to Hyrule Castle and fight loads of different monsters and find Zelda at the Sanctum, where she ends up being a clone of Ganondorf, and we have to fight Phantom Ganon. And then our sages come out and save us from Ganon's malice, and then we have to find one more sage to help us fight Ganondorf, because he is not at his full power, and nor are we. So we go underground to Minoru's construct factory, where we have to rebuild a robot for Minoru so that she can help us fight with the sages for Ganondorf, fight Ganondorf with us. So we go underground to Hyrule Castle, and again, like we did at the beginning of the game, and we fight Ganondorf with our sages, and we win, and we save Hyrule, we save Zelda, and everyone's saved. Two really cool stories, but overall I think we have to give yet another point to Tears of the Kingdom. Jeez, Breath of the Wild's getting destroyed. No, just Tears of the Kingdom story has a lot more detail to it and is much longer and much more interesting in my opinion, so that's an easy Tears of the Kingdom point. Now, talking about dungeons, Breath of the Wild had these massive mechanical beasts that are called divine beasts. Now, they were all in different regions of the map, and they all had different elements like water, fire, electricity, and wind like being used in them. They all represented different animals, like Varita represented an elephant, Varmeadow was a bird, Varudania a lizard, and finally Varnaboris looks like a camel. Now, the actual puzzles that were in the divine beasts had you like use different elements and different runes to kind of like solve puzzles, which sounds fun, but they were all pretty repetitive and they were incredibly easy. And the inside, the interior all looked very similar through all the divine beasts. I mean, it was cool how you could rotate the different divine beasts, but they were very similar inside and they all looked the same. Also, all the bosses were different variants of Ganon, like Fireblight Ganon, and like Waterblight Ganon, Thunderblight Ganon, Windblight Ganon, etc. So the bosses weren't usually a surprise. However, Varnaboris was a lot harder than all the other divine beasts, and the puzzles were way more in-depth and felt more like an actual dungeon, so Varnaboris for me is by far the best divine beast. And Thunderblight Ganon is actually quite a difficult boss fight, and I raged a lot doing it for the first time. And yeah, Varnaboris is actually just a really good divine beast when most of the other divine beasts aren't as good. Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons are so good. They're much more in-depth, they're much bigger, and the puzzles are so much harder. And there are the different elements again, like wind, fire, lightning, water, but they implement them so much better in the dungeons, and they just feel like proper traditional Zelda dungeons. And the bosses are just so good as well, and the abilities you get from them are just so much better. And that Hyrule Castle mission as well, that sort of dungeon was really cool, and they weren't all just like the same thing like in Breath of the Wild with the divine beasts. Like the bosses, they were all different bosses, the temples all looked different, they felt like their own original dungeon instead of like all divine beasts that were similar but just a tiny bit different as well. So overall, Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons are so good, and I think a lot of people agree with that they're amazing as well. So it won't be hard to decide which game wins this category. Well, that's an easy point for Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons have a lot more variety, and they feel much bigger, and like they have a lot more depth to them than Breath of the Wild's Divine Beast, so easy Tears of the Kingdom point. Both games have a good variety of enemies, but I'm going to talk about Breath of the Wild first. So Breath of the Wild has a lot of generic basic enemies you'd find in Zelda games, like bokoblins, moblins, lizalfos, etc. But it also has loads of overworld bosses, for example Moldugas, Stone Taluses, and Hinoxes, which are a lot of fun to fight. And we can't forget the dungeon bosses, which are a bit boring because they are mostly like Ganons, just like different varieties of Ganon, and the final two bosses are also varieties of Ganon, which does make things a bit boring. But there is the exception of Master Koga and Monk Mazkushia, which are two amazing boss fights which I love a lot, and I think a lot of people do as well. We can't forget though the Guardian and the Lionel, which are the two most terrifying and best overworld enemies. They're not really bosses, but they kind of are bosses, but they kind of are enemies as well, and they are really fun. By far the hardest, by far the best enemies, and they're just terrifying, especially the Guardian when that music starts playing. Tears of the Kingdom does have a lot of the same enemies as Breath of the Wild, but it does have some new generic ones as well, like the Erakudas, and it also has the boss Bokoblin, which is basically like a Moblin slash Hinox, but it's not as hard as a Hinox, and it doesn't have as much health, but it is quite cool. However, Tears of the Kingdom has added so many new overworld bosses while still managing to include most of the overworld bosses from Breath of the Wild except the Guardian, which were replaced with Gloom Hands, which I'm sure you guys know a lot about. They are a pain and they are terrifying. But the overworld bosses are sick, like the Flux Construct, the Frox, and by far the best, the King Gleeok and Gleeox, which are just so unbelievably fun to fight. They are very challenging and actually terrifying. And so that's really good, and it actually feels like a proper dungeon boss than an overworld boss, which is sick. And on the subject of dungeon bosses, the dungeon bosses are so much better because they're not like Blight Ganons anymore. They're loads of different bosses, they're different varieties, they all look different, the gameplay is different, and they're all really fun and satisfying to find out how to fight them. And once you beat them, it is very satisfying. So this game has a lot of amazing enemies and bosses. I think you guys already know which game's going to get that point. It's clearly Tears of the Kingdom. The enemies, they still have the same enemies from Breath of the Wild, while adding so many more and so many better ones to the game. With the new mechanics and abilities, just makes fighting so much better. But guys, we've got one more topic. This is it, the finale of both games. Which one does it better? So Breath of the Wild starts off by you going into Hyrule Castle, where it's infested by guardians. Every angle you're being shot at by guardians, and you have to try and keep your life while trying to get to the top of the castle where Calamity Ganon is. And once you reach the throne room where he is, you have an epic showdown in the inner sanctum of the castle, while the Divine Beast and the Ghost of the Champions help you by shooting the Divine Beast lasers at Ganon. He's still alive and you have to fight him to the death. And once you beat Calamity Ganon, the malice explodes out of him and forms Dark Beast Ganon, where Zelda has to present to you the Bow of Light and has to present weak points on his body so you're able to hit him and damage the beast. And once you've killed him and defeated him and hit all the weak points, Zelda is free and she fights him and uses the Triforce to absolutely obliterate Ganon into absolute nothing, and Hyrule is saved. And Breath of the Wild is finished. In Tears of the Kingdom, you and your fellow sages go down below in the depths below Hyrule Castle to find the Demon King Ganondorf in his chamber, regenerating health and power. And once he reaches his full power, he becomes the Demon King, the Menace Unleashed. You have a one-on-one duel with Ganondorf while your sages are back fighting his minions. It's an epic battle. It's Link versus Ganondorf, the fight of the century, the fight of the Zelda series. But Ganondorf gets his powerful form back. He masters the Secret Stone once again and becomes his really powerful form, where you and your sages have to fight him all at once. While your sages finish their fights, they join you in the fight against Ganondorf, and you somehow manage to destroy Ganondorf. And once he realises he can't win, he has to swallow his Secret Stone and become the Demon Dragon, where you, accompanied by the Light Dragon, aka Zelda, have to destroy the Demon Dragon. With the Master Sword, you have to hit weak points all over the dragon and reveal its Secret Stone. And Link, with the Master Sword, has to destroy the Secret Stone to blow up and completely destroy Ganondorf for once and save Hyrule once again. But that's not the end. Zelda is saved from the dragon form with Link and the ghosts of Rauru and Sonia. She is saved and Link has to catch Zelda and save her. And Zelda is in the safe hands of Link once again. And Tears of the Kingdom can finally finish in peace. Well, that's just one more easy win for Tears of the Kingdom. There's the final score, guys. 7-0 to Tears of the Kingdom. Jesus. Well, guys, that score says it. Tears of the Kingdom beats Breath of the Wild in every category. There is no reason to play Breath of the Wild if you have Tears of the Kingdom. You must get Tears of the Kingdom, guys. That's my message. But anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this video, then please smash the like button and subscribe. I'm doing a Let's Play on Tears of the Kingdom, so the playlist of that should be on screen right now. So if you enjoyed, then please subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Bye.